Okay, all good. Okay, now just a brief statement on the announcement relating to steel and aluminium tariffs coming out of the United States overnight. Obviously, this is a disappointing decision, for Australian business and for Australian exporters. It will have some direct impact on those exports. Our concern is that further down the track, we run the risk that there will be diversion of trade from other markets, and obviously we have to ensure that Australian producers are not disadvantaged as a result of what happens elsewhere in the world now. We've worked very closely from a business point of view with the Australian government, bringing every possible representation that could have been brought to bear in this case. This is a decision that is ultimately rests with the US administration. We have to play the long game here. We have to look to the future. Business will continue to work with the Australian government to press the case for Australian manufacturers going forward and for Australian exporters going forward. Happy to take some questions.
How would Australia be disadvantaged by the diversion?
Well, there is a risk, of course. I mean, in the first instance, the direct impact of these tariffs could end up suppressing exports of steel and aluminium. But I think the bigger risk is that we will see other affected countries, if they can't access the US market in the same way that they would like to, they will look for other markets. And if the Australian market is there, there's a risk that we could see increased pressure from imports coming to Australia as a result. That's likely to have a bigger disruption for the supply chain, for the industries that are using steel and aluminium, and so I think that's going to be, I think, one of the potential risks we see for the future. We'd urge the Australian government to look at that, to monitor that situation. If we need to take measures in terms of safeguards or anti-dumping measures, then obviously those sorts of things need to be on the table in the future.
It might be too soon to tell, but is there any way to quantify the impact of these tariffs? Job losses, millions of companies?
It's too early to tell. I mean, obviously, there's a limited number of steel smelters in Australia and aluminium smelters. They are there, and they do have a regional impact. So, there are implications if we lose sales. But look, this is not the major part of the market for those companies. We have to hope that impact will be minimal directly. I think the bigger risk is what happens through the supply chain if this has a knock-on impact in trade around the world.
How bad would it be for Australia if our local manufacturers set up shop, more of them set up shop in the US?
Well, some of them are already doing that, so that we do have major steel producers from this country who have very significant investments in the United States. And I think that goes to the point, it is unwarranted to apply this decision to Australia. We have a very strong two-way trade between the two countries. We have a free trade agreement which has been in place for the past 20 years. We have significant investment, inwards investment from the United States in Australia, and also investment by Australian manufacturers, including steel producers in the US. So, unfortunately, I think there's no justification really for applying this decision to Australia. There are strong grounds for an exemption. That's not been agreed to in the first instance, but I think we have to play the long game. We have to continue to work with government to make representations that ultimately Australian exports should be exempted from this tariff.
So looking at long-term impact on the supply chain, does that mean that we're in a kind of watch and wait situation at the moment, or is there something the government can do right now to sort of?
Well, I think the government has to ensure that it has the tools at its disposal, so that if we see that there's a risk that damage could be occurring, or that we do face a flood of imports, and that potentially is at cut rate prices, then they are able to respond. So we have in place an anti-dumping regime. We do have remedies that are available to the Australian government. They're fully within the WTO rules. We would say, obviously, do the groundwork now, ensure that we are prepared. If the evidence is there, we can respond to that quickly. But obviously, that work has to be done now.
So hypothetically, without
Sorry.
anti-dumping
Come
rules
to you next.
right now,
Sorry.
what are you suggesting in terms of, do we need to change our anti-dumping regulations now in order to stop that from happening?
Well, I think we have to understand that if we see evidence that that's emerging, we should be able to respond quickly. So yes, there are some preparatory steps that we can take. We need to make sure that we have the appropriate resources in place to mount an investigation, respond quickly, get a result, and impose or apply whatever appropriate remedies need to be put in place. It's too early to say whether that is going to be the case. There is a risk, so let's prepare for that risk right now. Sorry.
How do you play that long game? How does Australia overcome the seemingly ideological opposition from the Trump White House to exemptions? Or is this just the new reality that everyone and business has to face?
Well, I think we are operating with a different reality. I mean, things have changed in the past couple of months, and there are further things that could be in the pipeline. So we know that the US administration is undertaking further reviews. This is simply, I think, the first iteration of what we might see. The good thing here is that business and government have worked very closely together over the past month or so, bringing to bear the representations in Washington, direct discussions, the Prime Minister with the President. We've had senior ministers in Washington, DC over recent weeks. There's been a lot of exchanges behind the scenes between business and government. I think we are working very much on the same page on these issues. So, many of those relationships, it's a new administration. There are new people in the cabinet in the US, so we're seeking to build those relationships and to work with those people. Of course, there are also many long-established contacts in the US, in the Congress, and other places. So, across the board, we've got to continue to work on mounting that argument that we should respect the treaties that we have in place and really optimise the benefits of the two-way trade between the countries.
So you're optimistic that exemptions are still possible?
Oh, look, we've got to continue to press the case. I don't think we should hold out false hope that there'll be a quick change here, but we've seen already that measures can be announced and then measures can be varied. That's been a feature of what we've seen in the recent weeks and even in the past 24 hours. So we should continue to press our claims. I think we have strong grounds to urge for an exemption. Hopefully at some point those arguments will get traction.
Do you think Australia should continue on the course they have been, even though it hasn't been successful? What do you think the government should do differently?
Oh, look, that's very hard to say. I think every reasonable step's been taken, frankly, up until this point. And obviously, we should not give up. We should continue to press the case. Business will continue to work very actively with government to press the case, and that'll be the situation all the way up to the current federal election and beyond. So whatever the situation there, whoever forms the government of the day, we will be working to press the case that we want an open and fair trading relationship with the United States. They're a long-standing economic partner, and that will continue to be the case in the future.
How bad would it be for Australia if the market was flooded by importers redirecting?
Oh, that can have significant impact. So it's not just the smelters that are affected at that point. Then there are a range of companies that are doing fabrication of steel and aluminium products in Australia. There's a risk that they could be affected by imports that are coming from overseas, potentially that's just been diverted out of the US or affected by these measures. So we want to ensure that Australia is not disadvantaged in those circumstances unfairly. Of course, there are rules in place to deal with that, options available to government. We just have to be ready if that's the circumstance, that we have the ability to respond quickly and not to drag out an investigation over months and months while the damage is being incurred.
These aren't the only tariffs that we're necessarily facing. The Trump administration also pulled up on agriculture tariffs.
Yeah,
How impactful is those?
oh, look, there's a range of other issues, and you're right. This is just the first set of measures that have been applied, which are of relevance to Australia. There are other trade policy reviews that the US administration has announced. They've announced that they will be making decisions on a broader range of tariffs, and they've called out some other areas of sectoral focus, whether that's in agriculture, automotive, which is less relevant to us, pharmaceuticals. So look, let's wait and see. We'll see further announcements from the US administration in the coming weeks. There's no doubt about that. And obviously, we have to continue to press the case on those issues as well. The one thing we can't afford to do is to get into a tit-for-tat trade war with the United States. That's going to be completely counterproductive, and certainly there'll be no one in business advocating for that sort of response. Very good. Thank you. All good. Great. Thanks very much. All good. Cheers. Thanks again. Okay. Cheers. Oh, yes.